Hello, I'm Bruce DePoy. Coming up today on News Talk, another deadline looms for funding federal agencies beyond midnight. Why is Congress funding the government for only a few months at a time, lurching from crisis to crisis? And what is House Speaker John Boehner's surprise decision to resign? What does all that say about the intensity of the GOP civil war? We'll put these questions and others to Northern Virginia Congressman Rob Wittman. Also with us today, D.C. Councilman Kenyon McDuffie. We'll talk with him about the town hall meeting he just held on crime in the nation's capital. And we'll get his reaction to the fire chief's plan for easing the district's ambulance shortage.
From News Channel 8, this is News Talk with Bruce DePoy.
We are so delighted to have you with us today. A great lineup, everybody. Thanks for making us a part of your day. As we come on the air this time, the Senate has approved legislation to keep the government funded beyond midnight. The House has not. It is expected that lawmakers will ultimately pass a continuing resolution to keep agencies from shutting down, but the CR is only expected to last until December, when we, it seems, will endure the same brinksmanship all over again. Let's go straight to Congressman Rob Wittman, who joins us now from Capitol Hill, a Republican. He represents Virginia's 1st District. He's with us via our Connect to Congress series, and it's great to see you, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Good morning, Bruce. It's great to be with you this morning.
Thanks for being with us. What's your expectation? What should your constituents and folks around the region, many of them federal employees or folks who have a federal employee spouse or family member bringing home a paycheck, what's your expectation about what ultimately will come between now and midnight?
Well, I do expect that the continuing resolution will pass, that government will be funded, but I think it goes back to a more fundamental issue, and that is, why do we end up at these crisis points instead of getting the job done well prior to this time? And as you know, Bruce, I've been an advocate to make sure that we get all 12 appropriations bills done well before the end of September. In fact, I think it's ridiculous that Congress goes home for 5 weeks in August with all this work left to be done. I've been an advocate to say, let's stay in Washington. Wrote the Speaker this time, said, we know what we need to do. Let's stay in Washington, get these appropriations bills done so we don't end up at this last-minute crisis management. And as you know, we're only going to go another 3 months, so there has to be a longer-term budget deal. We know how harmful continuing resolutions are to those folks that work in the agencies, to those folks that do contract work for the government. At every level, as I talk to folks throughout my district, they say, Rob, get on the path of getting things done with some certainty and with some regularity, and not budgeting through these ridiculous continuing resolutions that just create uncertainty. They also don't allow us to move things forward. It's not the way to run business here on Capitol Hill. It's not the way to run our federal government. It's not the way any private businesses run their business. So we have to fundamentally change how Congress operates.
Why?
That must be our charge.
Why do we find ourselves in this posture? What happened to what sometimes people refer to as regular order, the regular budgeting and appropriations process? We've been promised that will return, and yet we get the promises but not the reality, if you will, no delivery. Can you, as someone who's there and has the relationships and knows what's happening on the inside, can you sort of fill us in, help us understand where the breakdown is?
Sure. Well, it's up to members to push leadership to make sure we stick to regular order and that we get our job done. That's why I've been so vocal with leadership to say we can't leave town in August knowing these things we have to get done without getting appropriations bills done. We need to get a budget done on time. April 15th needs to be the time we get the budget done. If not, members of Congress shouldn't be paid. Bruce, we have to fundamentally change how Congress operates, and ultimately it's up to members of Congress to get the leadership to do the right things. We must stand to fundamentally change how Congress operates. It starts with the members like myself and others saying, let's get this done. Let's make sure our leaders do what members say needs to be done.
Are you worried about what happens in December when the same situation we face now presumably returns?
Well, it could. That's why it's incumbent upon our leaders to start on issues now. I do believe there's some conversations about what a budget deal would look like, what should be in a budget deal. Those conversations have started. I want to make sure they get done well before December 11th so the body can have the discussion, the debate about what we need to do, and then get a bill passed on time so we don't end up with this last-minute brinksmanship that frustrates all of us. We know what we have to do. Let's get it done.
Were you surprised as everyone else, Congressman, by John Boehner's decision not just to step down as Speaker, but to leave Washington, to quit his position as a member of Congress in the middle of his term. Does it say to you that this guy, who's been described by those who know him pretty well as both a conservative and a real deal maker, someone who wants to find compromise and get things done, not just posture, does it say to you he is both fed up and unclear of anything different coming around the next turn?
Well, I think there are a variety of forces, Bruce, that led to Speaker Boehner leaving. I do believe he would have left prior to the end of his term in Congress. It was only a matter of when. I think more of the discussions up here became about Speaker Boehner rather than about what Congress needs to do. And I think he saw that the attention needed to go away from him and back towards the membership. So I admire what he did. I admire his service to our nation, but I also understand, too, that he's a pretty intuitive leader, and he understands that when it became more about him, the best thing for the body was for him to step aside and make sure that members now took up the mantle and said, what are members going to do to get the body back on track?
It was one member who filed this obscure motion over the summer, and it was, I don't think a lot of people took it that seriously, or maybe they took it seriously because it's unusual, but they didn't think it would lead to anything. The Speaker himself expressed confidence that this would be sort of a gnat and nothing really significant. Lo and behold, the Pope comes to town. He has an opportunity to meet with the Pope individually. It's a great source of pride. It's the realization of 20 years' work, we are told. The next day he says, I'm done. I am out of here. Some have described what's happening right now in your conference as chaos. Can you give us a feel for what's happening and where you hope or think things will go?
Sure. Well, I don't think it's chaotic. I think, obviously, for many folks, this was unexpected, only in the time that it occurred. But there's been a lot of productive conversation within our conference about what should we do as a conference, how do we make sure we can come together on common ideas to get things done. And Bruce, it ultimately goes back to members of the conference making sure that we do the job for the nation. That's where everybody gets frustrated up here. That's where our constituents get frustrated. That's where I get frustrated, as well as other members, to understand that we must get these things done. We must have the spirited debates, but at the end of the day, people expect Congress to work. They want us to express our ideas. They want us to put those ideas of the folks back home that we represent, but ultimately it's up to the members to take charge of where things go and to get things done.
Do you think Kevin McCarthy will be the next speaker? Are you hoping that he'll be the next speaker? And since he's not as well known as the local members like yourself and folks like John Boehner, can you tell us a little bit about him?
Sure. You know, Kevin's a member from California. He's got a good perspective on things. He, like myself, has some military in his district, so I think he understands those things. What I have done is to engage those members that have expressed an interest in the speakership to talk to them about what they are going to do to fundamentally change how we operate. I want to know where they stand on no budget, no pay. Make sure we get a budget done on time. Where do they stand on getting all 12 appropriations bills done before we leave to go home in August? Where do they stand on changing the budgeting process to a 1-year to maybe a 2-year budgeting process? Where do they stand on setting aside the defense sequester? Just that area on defense spending. How do we reestablish what we must do with our military? Those are critical issues. I am very, very deliberative in talking to the individuals running, which is Daniel Webster and Kevin McCarthy, to understand where they are before I provide my support to anyone in that realm. And I think that's what other members are doing, as well as different groups on Capitol Hill. So it's been a good process. There was a caucus meeting last night to make sure we don't rush into this, to make sure we take the time so that members of the caucus understand what we must do collectively and how we make sure that we have a leader that can help us accomplish that.
Some of your colleagues feel there shouldn't be a budget going forward, even if it's short-term, unless Planned Parenthood is defunded. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm very, very adamant about making sure that we take up the Planned Parenthood issue. I do think Planned Parenthood needs to be defunded, but I think it's an issue that should be separate from the budget itself. You know, we've all seen that shutdowns are not in any way productive, especially when it affects the great men and women that work for our nation, our FBI agents, our nurses in VA facilities. We don't want them to be hurt with this, and as you know, I want to make sure, too, that even with any kind of threat of a shutdown, that we make sure that those great men and women that work for our government don't become the victims in this, and that they get paid if there is a shutdown. Now, I don't think shutdowns are the way we should manage government or the way we should express our ideas on particular issues. There are some people that wish to tie it to that. I'm as adamant as I can be about Planned Parenthood, but not in how we would not fund the government based on whether or not a provision there passes or fails.
The Speaker has said he would like to clean the barn for his successor. Do you think we'll see a highway bill?
I certainly hope so. We must fund transportation in the long term, and especially here in Northern Virginia. If any place in the nation knows the frustrations and the challenges we face with transportation, it's here. And with those members of Congress that live in this region, they see it and live it every day. We must get that transportation bill done, and it must be in the longer term, and I think there's some ways that we can do that. I think there's more common ground than differences, and anybody that's here in the Washington metro area understands how critical this is for our nation to get this done.
A new poll out today, an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, finds that a majority of Americans think that our political system works doesn't work in the main, and when it does work, it's primarily to benefit the elites, folks in Washington, folks on Wall Street. This may dovetail with what we're seeing in the GOP presidential primary, where the outsiders seem to be surging ahead and the more establishment candidates, folks who've been or are governors and senators, seem to be struggling to find traction. What's your read? Because you're someone who works in town, works here in the district on the Hill during the day, goes home to your district in the evening. How do you absorb? What's your read on what's happening right now?
Well, Bruce, I see that frustration on both sides of the aisle. I see it with Republicans and Democrats, and we see that, I think, with presidential candidates and the issues that they're dealing with. There's a deep sense of frustration there. People want to see their government work. They understand that there's differences in ideas. They want us to express that, but at the end of the day, they want us to get things done. I think people, too, are very, very frustrated with their sense of people not understanding the urgency with which they have in their hearts and minds, and they want to see that expressed in their governmental leaders. And I think that's why they look at folks that are connected with Washington and say, what you all are doing hasn't been working. Let's do something different. And I know as I talk to folks out there, I understand their frustration, express it every day, and even on an issue like transportation, I live it every day, going back and forth.
I can imagine.
Understand all those issues.
Absolutely, I can imagine you do. With your district being where it is and the challenges people all around the region face getting around, I am sure you spend more time than you would like in traffic.
Yes.
Congressman Rob Wittman of Virginia's 1st District, part of our Connect to Congress series. Congressman, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this time. We look forward to speaking with you again.
Bruce, thank you so much.
Take care. D.C. Councilman Kenyon McDuffie joins us here right after this.